Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thanks so much for coming to a side event presented jointly by the Government of New Zealand, the International Emissions Trading Association, and the Environmental Defence Fund. My name is Dirk Forrester, and I'm the President and CEO of IETA, and we're delighted to be a part of sort of a team effort today to talk about the future of markets in support of climate change, and in particular, how to unleash the true potential of the Paris Agreement. We've divided this session into sort of two parts. The first is a ministerial segment, and then we'll have more of a technical experts session. But the ministerial segment, which we'll begin with, I just want to say in advance, we all know what it's like to try to get ministers to a side event at a COP, and we know that they tend to have to move on to things. So we're going to understand if we have some ministers coming and going in this. I know one of our ministers is not here yet, but we know he's on his way. So hopefully we'll have a full complement for you this afternoon. We all owe a big debt of gratitude to these governments for being participants in the New Zealand Declaration. The New Zealand Declaration was an effort to draw together a lot of the parties that were interested in cooperating on market-based approaches and building common systems and systems with integrity and with high quality attributes to them. This was led by the Government of New Zealand and presented in the last evening in Paris, and certainly drew a lot of interest from the private sector who watches for every signal of potential interest in markets and how to build them stronger for the future. So we really appreciate the opportunity to hear from Minister Paula Bennett, who is the Minister for Social Development, Employment and Youth Affairs in New Zealand. Our champion of the New Zealand Declaration, and we'd love for her to start us off. So, Minister Bennett, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dirk, and thank you everyone for coming and showing an interest. Can I just acknowledge fellow ministers from other countries that are going to be coming and going, and certainly can I acknowledge the 18 countries so far that have signed the declaration, and really the effects of that and how significant it is from our perspective. But as like all of these things, it's now the hard work that really starts as we start working out what that means, what its possibilities are, and how we go about it. So I'm not planning on giving you a long, pre-written by someone else dissertation on where I think carbon markets should be. You have got the opportunity, I think, to hear from the experts in the second half of this session, and hopefully have a chance to get a bit more interactive as well and work through some of that detail and where it should be. But there can be no doubt about it that as each of us kind of is squarely focused on how we transition our own economies and societies to that low emission world, we know that markets both enhance ambitions towards those Paris goals, and equally, if they cost less, which the World Bank tells us they do, it means that we can then do a whole lot more. My argument is, when we're looking at New Zealand at international carbon markets and what that might be, is that it's one atmosphere. And at the end of the day, if we're looking at reducing global emissions, then we actually have a role to do that across the whole globe and country to country. And if we get this right, then there are real potentials for what that can mean for us. Dirk he touched on it, but I think that the biggest discussions really have to be around that commitment to environmental integrity, transparency, and the avoidance of double counting when market mechanisms are being used. And I know that's the kind of work that you're doing now, but for us, that integrity of what's happening, of what is going on, of what's being planted, of what we count, how we count it, how transparent we are. We should learn from the mistakes of the past, quite frankly. So we may as well be direct and say that there have been certainly some lessons that need to be learned, and we have learned them. And I hope we've learnt them globally. So now we have an opportunity to put a line in the sand and ensure that anything that we are looking at is of that high integrity and is where it needs to be. There's no point in us using markets if they don't deliver on our Paris goals. I mean, they have to deliver on real emissions reductions. And as I say, for that really comes down to the integrity of units that you might be looking at. And we initiated the declaration because whatever Paris delivered, and at the time that it was actually signed, we didn't know exactly what Paris was going to deliver. We wanted to send a clear signal that markets would be part of the future and that they must have that high standard of environmental integrity. So we're pleased that a significant and diverse group of countries decided to join. The group of 18 countries has subsequently commissioned work on what those rules, standards and guidelines need to be, and ensure that the market will deliver both that high ambition that Paris has given us, but equally integrity as well. What drives this group is getting on and doing the actual job. So as this is the action COP, I think it's a great opportunity at this side event to really get into the nuts and bolts of what that means. I invite others who are really interested in that environmental integrity and looking at what international markets look like to join the group so that they can be part of looking at what those rules look like and how it might actually work internationally. So that's about it from me. If there's anything I want to add, it is, as I say, that I think that we are kind of in it together, and that's stating the obvious, but this is where we get to really get into what those rules might look like. We in New Zealand have had an emissions trading scheme for the last 8 years. We're currently reviewing it and making sure that it's fit for purpose as we work towards our NDC, which is hugely ambitious. Every time I kind of look at it, we want to bend the curve in New Zealand and lower our own emissions. But when we're sort of 0.16% of global emissions, we equally have a role to play, however small, but significant in the world itself. So we do see international markets as being a part of that. We're thrilled to see so many people here, and we wish you well in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Bennett, and particularly for reminding us about that integrity word. It's something that I think sometimes there's a view that people in markets and people that want environmental integrity are on different sides, and nothing could be further from the truth. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because if you're in a market, you want to buy things that you know are good for compliance, and you want to buy things that you know the public will have confidence in. So it's a great place to start. Thank you so much. Next, I'm really pleased that we could be joined by Kyung-Kyu Cho, the Minister of Environment from the Republic of Korea. We at IETA watch with great interest the developments in the South Korean market. It's a place that we've seen a lot of innovation already. We know we're going to see more of it, and I'll tell you, Minister, as a sign of our interest in your market, for the first time our board elected a Korean board member this week. So we're excited to have a new presence in Korea. So please join us in welcoming Minister Cho.
Let me first express my sincere appreciation to Your Excellency Paolo Bennett for giving me this opportunity to speak at this important event. We are gathered here almost 1 year after Paris to share our views and the perspectives of merits of a market mechanism. The purpose of carbon markets is to put a clearing price tag on carbon emissions. Such carbon pricing serves as an effective tool for changing human behavior toward unhealthy high carbon consumption patterns. This is the reason why Korea launched the emission trading scheme in 2015. It has been 2 years since it went into operation, and we are happy to announce that the market has maintained a stable price of $14 on average. For the first year, there was a balance between the total number of allowances and the total emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the important process of discussing the international market mechanism for the Paris Agreement. I'd like to share 2 important lessons that we learned from creating the Korean carbon market. First, the launch of ETS took a long time in preparation, especially in establishing the MRV system. We started the effort in 2010, and it took more than 5 years to build a robust system. Second, it took even longer to build trust and understanding among participating companies and the stakeholders. We had many consultations with the businesses for a long period of time. Efforts such as working together to develop a benchmarking allocation system have helped in building that trust. Ladies and gentlemen, the creation of a new market mechanism will require similar effort. I believe that this partnership among the countries present here can play an important role in this regard. Korea will also do its part by contributing to the creation of the new carbon market. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
We'd like to thank Minister Cho. He has to move on to another meeting, and we knew that, and so we're going to respectfully thank him for his remarks, and really appreciate him taking the time out of a busy schedule to be with us. For those of us that have been involved in carbon markets for a long time, we know that a lot of the early innovation was thanks to the Dutch government, because before there was an EU ETS and before there was a UK ETS, there was an erupt and a sirupt that many of us tried to feed projects into to test out how MRV would work and test out in advance of the establishment of the Kyoto Protocol's mechanisms, sort of how the voluntary markets would work. So we really appreciate your leadership as a government over all of these years. And now we get a chance to hear from Minister Sharon Dijksma, the Minister of Environment from the Netherlands. And Minister Dijksma is someone also that we work closely with in the Carbon Pricing Leadership Coalition. She's a real leader there. So the floor is yours, Minister. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words. I would like to make a few points on carbon pricing systems and the importance of transparency and integrity. And it goes without saying that carbon pricing is really the key to achieve our Paris objective to redirect investment towards low carbon and climate resilience in a cost-effective way. So the question, ladies and gentlemen, is why doesn't it happen? And I was sitting here and thinking about it, and I thought, well, the problem is that carbon pricing is at this moment just not sexy enough. Really. And there was a song, I don't know, how many of you know Beyonce? Everybody, okay. She had this song to all the single ladies. Now, I'm not a single lady, but I know this song by heart. And since Michelle Obama, as First Lady, sung this with James Corden in karaoke carpool, I dare to mention it. And she said in that song, well, if you like it, you should have put a ring on it. And this is the same with carbon. If you want to change it, you should put a price on it. And it just doesn't happen. So now we get to the serious part of my contribution, don't worry. Trading of emission can offer, as you all know, a good avenue to bolster our ambition. But of course, only markets are trustworthy and send robust and only if markets are trustworthy and send robust and clear price signals. So trust and transparency, those two things are so-called the backbone of any market. And we have to know what emissions we reduce, what we buy, and what we sell. And a ton of carbon abated and traded should be really account as 1 ton. And in elaborating Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, we need to get the two things right. First of all, the balance between what we do and agree inside the UNFCCC and how much we can leave to the outside world. And my sense is that there is a long and growing experience with setting up carbon pricing systems across the globe. And this morning I had the privilege to talk to the Chinese delegation, and they are also experimenting with carbon pricing systems and really are ready to make the next step. So if we in Europe connect each other with Canada, for instance, with New Zealand, with China, then we really can make a big change. There are also growing calls from the investors and financial community for carbon disclosure and transparency. And so much of what we may want to agree as guidance may already be common practice. And so we don't have to start